DJ, PK, and Brian Geltzeiler, SiriusXM NBA Radio host and NBA TV contributor, joins us. Brian, good morning, except in New York, where I believe they consider this a great morning, a fantastic morning, an unreal morning.
Good morning, guys. Heck of a basketball game last night, huh?
I'd say so. In terms of a critical analysis of it, where do you start?
Well, all right. So, listen, I thought the Knicks played the worst defensive half of basketball. They maybe played all season. Forget about the playoffs. They maybe played all season. The lack of attention to detail in the first half was galling. The way that their weak side defenders were, leaning into the paint a little too much and not closing out aggressively on the Spurs shooters, they got punished very badly for them. I mean, I actually think Vassell just hit another open three. I mean, they just kept them wide open the entire half. And again, it was all in the name of chipping on Wemby, but that didn't even work well. Like, it was a disgusting display of defense by the New York Knicks in the first half. Whatever they talked about in the locker room, the adjustments they made, number one, they cut off all the Spurs driving lanes. Keep in mind, Spurs 76 points in the first half, 30 points in the second half. Okay, they sealed them on driving lanes, all right, and they closed out on shooters on the weak side. And that took advantage of the Spurs' immaturity, because the number one reason the San Antonio Spurs are down 3-1 in the series, and we can give the Knicks all their flowers, okay? But they also have won 2 games by 1 point apiece. That took catastrophic mental errors from the San Antonio Spurs to get the Knicks those wins. The number one reason the San Antonio Spurs are losing the series 3-1 right now is for the volumes of time that they forget that they have Victor Wembanyama on their team on the offensive end of the floor. And you have guys taking one-pass threes. Champagny had a 3 towards the end of the third quarter. I tweeted this out at the time, guys. You keep taking those kinds of threes in transition, and it led to a long rebound and an easy Brunson transition layup. You keep taking those kinds of threes, you're going to get the Knicks an engraved invitation to be back in the game. And that is exactly what happened. It was a mental and emotional meltdown for the San Antonio Spurs. A lot of that is on that coaching staff. It really is. And I think Mitch Johnson's done a fantastic job throughout these playoffs. I do not think he did a fantastic job last night in the second half of that game. Misuse of timeouts. I didn't think Harper was in there for enough minutes at certain points in time. Just a gross lack of discipline. Here's the other thing. Okay, they did such a good job in Game 3 of harassing Jalen Brunson and bringing the ball up the floor, with Castle and Harper doing that. Can somebody on that side explain to me that you ended up with Vassell and Champagny spending so much time on Brunson in the fourth quarter? And listen, Mike Brown, I give him all the credit in the world, and I thought he was going to do this with either McBride or Alvarado, whoever was playing better. McBride was terrible, so he did it with Alvarado. He actually had an extra ball handler on the floor and sacrificed shooting to be able to help Brunson out, getting the ball up the floor if he needed it, and he didn't need it. Here's the other thing. How is OG Anunoby able to get the open looks he's getting when the Knicks played the majority of the fourth quarter with 2 non-shooters on the floor with Hart and Alvarado? And I know Alvarado did hit a 3 late. Alvarado was terrific down the stretch of that game. But you can't exploit the Knicks better than that and have 2 non-shooters and load up on Brunson and Anunoby. I just thought the Spurs, the meltdown emotionally and mentally went from the coaching staff directly to the roster, to the players. And De'Aaron Fox, who's supposed to be the veteran influence, with the mistake of mistakes, not dribbling that ball out. Listen, OG had 3 transition blocks over the last 2 games. He thought he had a good 3 steps ahead of him. Just the fact that OG was even in the backcourt with him would have indicated dribble the ball out and make him chase you. He could listen, if he got away from Anunoby, he could have killed the entire rest of the clock, and the Spurs win that game. So it was a variety of things, but that's kind of my synopsis, boys.
Sure.
I thought it was brilliant. And you always think that smart people, whenever you identify someone, oh, that person's really smart, you can always go back and, well, that's because they agree with you. And I agree with everything you just said. You just checked out so many boxes. PK and I were looking at each other and nodding like, yep, we've talked about that this morning. Yep. I thought that whoever lost, with about 2 minutes to go, and I think it was right after an atrocious turnover by Fox, just floating the ball back into the middle of the court at midcourt, which I did in the 9th grade and got pulled from the game for. Yep. And then Hart blew the layup at the other end and didn't make him pay for it. I thought whoever loses this game is going to rue the dozens of blatant mistakes that have been made, and whoever wins will just forget about that and go, whew, got out of there with a W, thank goodness. it was entertaining basketball, but it was super sloppy, and both teams had stretches where they were atrocious. And I think you just checked a lot of those boxes for both those teams.
Yeah, and listen, Hart should be thanking his lucky stars, okay?
Yeah.
Josh Hart, you know what? Go buy OG Anunoby an expensive watch, okay? Because when he was able, he took Hart off the griddle. Because you talked about the missed layup. How about the missed box out on Castle and he had a foul?
Yeah.
And that's not Josh Hart. Josh Hart he's one of the best rebounding wings in the league. And that's just a for lack of a better term, a brain fart at the worst possible time. And Castle, second-year player, 21 years old, goes to the free throw line in that atmosphere in Madison Square Garden and drains those 2 free throws like they're nothing. And I want to go back to that point for this reason, guys, because, listen, this series is still 3-1, okay?
Checking another
and
box.
The Knicks have to win a 4th game to win the NBA championship. 2 of those games, I'm going to go back to it again, were 1-point victories. Castle was unflappable in that spot. This whole notion, and you're hearing it from a ton of Knicks fans this morning, that the Knicks somehow permanently broke the Spurs last night. If the Knicks believe that, that is a very naive thing to believe. This is a mentally tough team that is new to this scene, but they are not going to give in. Did you see some clown last night threw an egg and hit Victor Wembanyama in the head walking into his hotel after the game last night? Okay, all right. Did you see how Wembanyama reacted? He didn't. He just kept walking. This team. The Spurs are going to come out angry, determined, focused, and I think they could beat the Knicks by double digits in Game 5, and you come back to the Garden 3-2 for a Game 6. I am not shoveling dirt on the San Antonio Spurs in any way, shape, or form right now. They're too talented. They're too good. They are in this spot in this series because they haven't been smart, and that's something that I think gets improved on. This I can promise you. Today's a travel day. Tomorrow, the Spurs will assemble at their facility, and I can promise you one guy will spend some time talking to that entire team about their mindset and where they need to be going into Game 5, and that'll be Greg Popovich, because he's going to try to impart some of his experience that he's had over the years in these spots to some of these guys, and he will get a captive audience from this group. I don't think the Spurs are mentally weak in spite of blowing that lead last night. I think that they made a mountain of mistakes. They got away from what they were doing well, and they got away from what their strength is, which is running everything through their big guy, no matter what area of the floor. I don't even care if he has it on the perimeter. They just have to run everything through the big guy. They got away from him once again for long stretches. And then when they went back to him, he played nervous. And one guy that we haven't mentioned yet, and we have to mention, is Karl Anthony Towns, who I think I don't even look at his box score. What he is able to do defensively and has done against Wembanyama in this series is another major reason the Knicks are up 3-1. And in the second half last night, he did a super job guarding him. The Spurs had him in foul trouble and did not attack in the second half. The game changes when Towns goes to the bench. Mitchell Robinson hasn't guarded Wembanyama close to as well as Towns has. Anunoby really can't do it either, although he's doing the best he can. When he does, the Spurs they should have absolutely been pounding the ball to Wembanyama with Towns on him, trying to get Towns over to the bench. The other thing that's important, Karl Towns on that inbound, and give Mike Brown credit for putting his 7-footer on the inbounder. Dylan Harper's pass, that, by the way, if Towns doesn't tip that pass, Castle's got a alley-oop layup to win that
look
game.
Like it, yeah.
The play worked, guys. The back screen was set. Robinson didn't get through it, and Castle was alone. Towns got a hand on that pass. Because he got a hand on that pass, Hart was able to catch up in the switch. And to me, listen, that kind of stuff I think is absolutely crucial here. The Spurs were that close to being able to win that game, and that's something that they have to take with them to go over to Game 5 in San Antonio on Saturday night.
The one thing that there's several, but one thing that did bother me, and I've seen this repeatedly, is that the teams get casual offensively, right? Obviously, in the first half, they were blistering hot. Good for them. But the reality is that that's hard to sustain for 48 minutes, because if you do, you're going to win by 50, and we rarely see that, right? And so I didn't, and we've talked about this, DJ and I didn't like settling for threes, particularly early in the shot clock in the second half. Find a way then, if it's 29, instead of going to the lead I'm talking about, instead of going to 49, how about go to 39? And I just don't like the settling, I think, is the word I would use for threes, the entire game. If you had a stretch, good for you. But maybe look, and I think you alluded to it, get offense running through the big man, get better shot selection. If for no other reason, that's going to take more time off the clock, and the clock is your ally in that point. So I have to criticize the shot selection by and large in the second half because I didn't think it allowed the Spurs to really put their feet on the Knicks' throat.
No, I think it's a great point. And listen, the concept that I go to when I think about here, and it's not just in NBA basketball. You see this concept on every level. I see it with my son in AAU and high school basketball. The concept of the heat check, guys. Mm-hmm. The concept of a hot shooter that thinks because he's a hot shooter, he can take whatever shots he wants. Most times, that's not good. That works against a team and against team basketball. The Spurs had several heat check guys that hit a bunch of threes in the first half. Harper, Vassell, Champagny, and they took some bad shots in the second half. That whole concept of the heat check is very, very damaging and normally happens when you have a big lead. And normally when everybody gets going on a heat check and decides they're going to take bad shots, it invites the losing team back into the game, as it did with the Knicks last night. And that was a big thing. Here's the second thing that it's important to understand also, guys. You know, the art of tempo control has been lost somewhere along the lines here. When you are up in a game like that, part of playing an intellectually smart and winning basketball game is knowing when to run and knowing when to walk, knowing when to walk the ball up the floor, knowing when to understand that using 18 to 20 seconds of a shot clock has a net benefit for you in the third quarter of a game that you're up 29 points. Don't start to play fast and loose and feel full of yourself. Humility is so important on a basketball court. One of the reasons I invoked Popovich earlier on, it's Greg Popovich has an old saying about your mentality when you play basketball. He calls it an appropriate level of fear. And I think the Spurs lost they didn't have enough fear. They didn't understand the discipline that they had to continue to play with once shots didn't fall. It was almost like once shots aren't falling. Like it's a classic example, live by the three, die by the three. But here's the thing about the Spurs last night, they didn't have to die by the three. When you have Victor Wembanyama on your team, you don't ever have to die by the three, and they died by the three.
There are people who believe that fatigue has been a major problem for the Spurs, that they played a 7-game conference final that was super intense, while meanwhile the Knicks were blowing through a sweep that looked like it was over at some point during Game 2. And that the Spurs' only win in the NBA Finals so far has come when there were 3 days between games, from Friday to Monday, from Game 2 to 3. And that now it's going to be 3 days till the game on Saturday, 3 days till Tuesday, 3 days till Friday, and that this is going to be a major plus from the Spurs. The facts are what they are. Are you buying that they're going to be able to capitalize on these facts, this schedule, and this bonus rest that the schedule is giving them?
Certainly for Game 5, yes. I think there's something to that. I do. First of all, and I think there's something to that for this reason. I think you could make the case that fatigue cost them Game 1. They ran out of steam down the close of Game 1. Number 2, let's not forget Victor Wembanyama right now is playing more minutes than he's ever played in his entire basketball career. They played him 44 minutes last night, and I'm not faulting Mitch Johnson. It's all hands on deck. This is the NBA Finals. This is the time that you play him and you run him that way. But what's happened to him, which is interesting, is the energy he has to expend guarding Karl Anthony Towns makes him a less effective help defender. And that's a really important factor here. And that's why Knicks fans went crazy over what happened a minute into the game where Mitch Johnson, which I thought was an insane replay, but give him credit, it worked. But he challenged a call, a Towns-Wembanyama call that really could have gone either way. I don't think the refs got it so terribly wrong in the way Knicks fans. I actually thought the first foul on Towns was a worse call, was a touch foul that didn't need to be called in the first possession of the game. That one could have gone either way. But the important point in all that is what it takes out of Wemby to have to guard Towns on the perimeter and then be what I like to call Brunson's mid-range shadow. He was SGA's mid-range shadow in the OKC series, but he's so helpful to the guy on the ball because he's just he doesn't have to get that close to be a presence on guys like Brunson and SGA in the mid-range. And that, to me, has been the single reason that Brunson has had some struggles in this series. And listen, he was excellent the second half last night. There's no two ways about it. But he's played more bad quarters than good in this series, and that's been a big reason for it. But I also think having Wembanyama have to do all of that does wear him down a little bit. The extra day of rest, I think is huge for Wemby right now when he's in uncharted territory in terms of the amount of minutes that he's had to play. And listen, the Knicks look fresh as a daisy right now. Why do they look fresh as a daisy? They had the benefit of 2 8-game vacations in the middle of the playoffs. And by the way, it's not a gift, boys. They earned it. They swept teams. They had their foot on teams' throats, and they pressed down and finished them off. They earned that stuff, and you earn that stuff because it's a net benefit now at this stage of the playoffs. So I do think, yes, I think the fatigue thing becomes a little more equalized with the extra day off. I mean, there is something to that. And I will tell you guys this, and I know Knicks fans are going to think I'm insane. I'd be surprised if the Spurs don't win by double digits on Saturday night. I really do, and I think we're coming back for Tuesday night Game 6 at Madison Square Garden.
I'll throw a Jazz question at you. Bill Simmons got that Boston connection with the Angels in Boston, obviously, with their history there. And he's talking about he thinks they're going to draft Boozer. What do you think?
So, listen, on one hand, I think the Jazz should not worry about what position to draft and just draft the best player possible. Here's the one thing that I take pause at. And Cameron Boozer is going to be an excellent NBA player. And I think it's almost a lazy comparison to compare him to his father because his father never had the perimeter game that he has, was never the passer or the ball handler that Cam Boozer is. Here's my issue with taking Cam Boozer in that spot. You're leaving 2 superior athletes on the board. And you're seeing it now, guys. It's as good as a guy like Jalen Brunson is, and he's incredible. OG Anunoby showed you what a high-end premium athlete could do last night in a big spot, okay? And that was an incredibly athletic play. Here's what I'm saying to you, if you have a guy that combines the skill and athleticism, to me, that's always going to be more valuable and have more upside than getting a guy that has the skill level. And don't get me wrong, Boozer's not a bad athlete. He's a very good athlete. But Dabonsa, who probably won't be there, Caleb Wilson, Darren Peterson, they're all better athletes. They all are. And that's my concern there. That's my one concern with taking Boozer. Do I think Boozer's going to be a very good NBA player? I do. Do I think Boozer's going to be a superstar? Probably not. Do I think any one of those other 3 guys, and maybe 2 of those other 3 guys, could be superstars? I do. I believe that. And that's where I think that maybe if they do that, they're going to make a mistake. But here's the other thing I'm going to say regarding what Simmons had to say about that. And I listen to every Simmons podcast. I'm an enormous Bill Simmons fan, as you guys know. We're getting to the draft. So today is the 11th. The draft's in 12 days. All right, we're very close to getting to Danny Ainge lying time, okay, where Danny Ainge will not tell the truth as you get closer. Danny will float rumors out there of guys he's interested in to see who may come up behind him and say, hey, we want that guy. Maybe we'll give you something for him. Danny is the master, okay, of floating smoke screens this time of year. No one is better. Okay, he pulled it with Tatum. He bluffed that whole draft and ended up getting an extra pick and trading out of number 1 when he was with Boston and got Tatum at 3. Danny's brilliant this time of year. So what I would say about all the Boozer buzz, and I'm hearing it too, take it with a grain of salt. And I understand that Danny's not the only decision maker there, but Austin, he comes from Danny's loins, boys, okay? And he's got the same type of instincts on what he's going to do, Austin Ainge. So I would caution that not to buy too far into the Boozer narrative. There's a big groundswell of Boozer support league-wide to be a top 2 pick in this draft. I think Danny's leaning into it a little bit to see if potentially it can net the Jazz some extra assets.
You may have crossed paths with Walt Perrin when he was working in New York. He was in Utah working for Kevin O'Connor. Did a lot of scouting. We rarely saw him during the season, but they would always run him out to do the media stuff leading up to the draft. And every time they do a workout, Kevin O'Connor would make the players available and make Walt available, even if Kevin wasn't. And Walt would get asked all the time about the draft and reports, and he would just look at him. Liars Club is in session. He wouldn't wait for 2 weeks. He was right. Like 5 weeks before the draft. Liars Club is in session. What you hear might be true, but it might not be anywhere near the truth.
Who in their right mind is leaking the truth right now as you get this close to the draft, especially a draft where these top 4 picks are so incredibly valuable because of the players that are going to be taken. And listen, Danny Ainge, as far as the rest of these team presidents and general managers are concerned, Danny Ainge wrote that book. He did. He's the master of it. So I would, again, take all of it with a grain of salt. I'd even take it with a grain of salt at the top of the draft. I mean, you're hearing a lot of Wizards buzz that DeBonce's going to be the guy. And maybe he is, and maybe he isn't. We have to see kind of what shakes out there, too. But I think you're getting there's definitely a lot of false information that's being floated in the thought of maybe motivating some teams to try to look to see to offer something. One thing I will say about this draft, guys, you may see some movement within the top 4 in terms of trading. No one is trading out of the top 4 of this draft. It will not happen.
I don't think I can find a draft where the top 4 guys, if you redrafted, were the top 4 guys. But is that going to happen this time? Are they really? There are no busts in the top 4? These 4 are all legit?
I don't think you're going to get a bust in this top 4. I know what people are saying about Darren Peterson. The people that are saying what they're saying about Darren Peterson haven't watched him long enough. Even with what happened in Kansas this year, he averaged over 20 points a game. He is as smooth a guard as we've seen come into this league since Kobe Bryant. And he can pass, he can shoot, he can guard. And I tell you, and I've told you guys this before, my partner Sam Mitchell coached him 3 different summers in AAU, knows Darren and his family very well. He will tell you straight out there is zero concern regarding Darren Peterson's competitive spirit. I know we heard the whole creatine thing and the cramping, and I think there was some of that was true. I think maybe it was dramatized a little bit, but I also think that he got an agent in his ear, and which let him know that this is a tune-up for much bigger money coming in the NBA, and you don't want to take any risk to knock you from the ability to be the number 1 overall pick in this draft. And I think that crept into his mentality too much. Listen, I didn't like that in the respect that Kansas paid plenty of money for him too. So, he owed them something there as well. My point being is I do think that so much of this with Peterson is overblown, and I think you can end up in a scenario where, these 4 guys all end up within 5 years being on one of the top 3 All-NBA teams. I think that all 4 of them have the potential to be that good.
He's Brian Geltzeiler. You hear him on SiriusXM NBA Radio, and you see him on NBA TV. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Always, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
DJ and PK, everything you missed in this show next. Stay with us.